No.
I'm Ailey.
Ailey.
Yeah.
And what's your name?
Don.
Doug?
Don.
Dunn?
D-O-N.
Dawn.
Dawn.
Sorry. Okay.
So, let me see, I'm doing this. It's recording.
Yay.
And
I got him right here. Or this is what you're looking for.
I'm doing my backup.
Okay.
Okay. Could you tell us what your name is and what your position is here at UT?
My name is Juliet Meggs, and I'm a doctoral student in the Counseling Psychology Department. So I am currently in a practicum at the College Counseling Center, and I teach a intro psych class as well.
Okay, thank you. What does transgendered mean to you?
You okay?
Yeah, it's just like, I feel awkward, cause like, not like cause of you, but like, cause I didn't like expect to have like this type of interview ever in my life, so it's kind of
Talking to a trans person, you mean?
Well, no, I talked to one before, but like never like sat down and like interviewed about it. Like it's
Yeah.
kind of, I feel like it's touchy, but like I don't know if it's like actually touchy or not, so I don't know how to react to it.
I think for me, I do lots of presentations to a bunch of different classes, and so I'm always talking about this stuff, and I'm always engaging with it. So I'm pretty comfortable with it and all that. But I can certainly appreciate that it's certainly not things that people are used to talking about unless they're me. Talk about it all
Oh,
the
I
time.
know.
Yeah,
I
I've
know.
never done this before, so it's really cool for me.
So what does transgendered mean to you?
Well, the term transgender, as I understand it, is an umbrella term that encompasses a bunch of different identities. And specifically, the identities are related to we're assigned something at birth, and if that assignment fits, if you are assigned male and that fits who you are, you would probably identify as cisgender. But if that doesn't fit you in some capacity, you might be transgender. So I identify as transsexual, which means that I identify as the opposite gender and sex than the one that I was assigned at birth. But there are other folks who are transgender who may feel like they have multiple genders, may exist in a culture that has a third gender instead of just a binary. They may be drag queens, they may be cross-dressers. There's a lot of different variants there. So I'm transgender, but also I'm transsexual underneath that as well.
So you prefer transgendered, or you prefer transsexual?
People I've said before that transsexual sounds almost like it's a disease, and transgender sounds softer.
Yeah.
So I think I'd probably just use transgender, and that's kind of the terminology that's become more popular. I think transsexual kind of gets more precisely at where I am underneath that umbrella, but transgender works for me pretty well.
Okay. Very cool.
Okay. Biologically, you were born male, but felt female. At what age did you first realize your gender identity?
Well, that's a complicated question. I've read narratives of other trans folks before, and some folks, like, whenever they're very young, they believe that they are or would like to be the opposite gender. So you might have a person who's assigned male, who everybody else is regarding as a little boy, say, I'm a little girl, and I need to go be with the girls and stand with the girls and go to the girls' restroom, things like that. But for other folks, including me, you don't necessarily have the words for it, but you know something's up.
Yeah.
So from a very young age, I just knew something was up, and I can remember many different experiences, even when I was 5 years old, where if you had asked me, do you want to be a girl, I would have said yes in a heartbeat. But because we live in a society that tells us that that's wrong to feel, I also, and not just wrong, but impossible, that I was a boy and there is no two ways about it, there's nothing else that I could be or do, then almost like I couldn't be transgender because I didn't know such a thing could exist. I didn't know that that was a thing that people did or were. So it took a long time before I claimed the label transgender as what described me, because I just felt like I was just so bad and wrong, and what I wanted was not just wrong but impossible. But looking back, I can see how it was there at a very young age. But it was only after a long time when I found out that it didn't have to be wrong and it didn't have to be impossible either for me to be female, that I was able to use the label transgender, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. Now, in social work, we deal a lot with the different perspectives, and the ecological perspective explains how we function or are supported in our environment by the people around us. Did you feel stressed as an adolescent coming into this, or experience depression or suicidal thoughts or anxiety that commonly is associated with coming into your identity?
So you're asking kind of what the psychological effects were on me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and definitely. And it's not like I'm just transgender. I mean, everybody has their own stuff going on, and I had a rocky home life independent of being trans, and so it's difficult for me to really differentiate, how many of this and how much of that played into it. But I was very depressed in high school, especially once puberty hit. That was really bad for me. I became anorexic significantly. And part of that was a way of getting control because my home life felt out of control. But part of it also was I did not want my body to be big and masculine and male. I was terrified of having that happen to me. And so I was really, really thin because I restricted eating for some of middle school and most of high school. I think I first considered suicide when I was probably in 11th grade, maybe a little bit sooner. And that was an ongoing process. It continues to be to this day. I attempted suicide when I was 20, if I recall correctly. And that's actually quite common for trans people, at least in the statistics that I've seen. Almost 1 in 2 trans people attempt suicide at some point in their lives, which is incredible. Like that, not just considering it, but taking steps to try to end our lives. And I was just really incredibly unhappy. And again, that's not just because I'm trans, but a significant part of it. And it wasn't really until I transitioned and I was able to really feel like myself that I started to have fleeting moments where things were okay. And so I've been growing into that as I've transitioned. But all kinds of stress, all kinds of depression, anxiety, and especially when I transitioned, it was incredibly intense. Like, I would come to campus for different things, and leaving the car and going and presenting in public as Juliet was terrifying. And I had to remind myself that if I didn't do this, I would kill myself. And so just like every day, leaving the house, leaving the car, preparing for God knows what and who knows how people would react, was a terrifying experience. And it's gotten better now, but I'm still really afraid a lot of the time of what people will say and how they'll respond, and I never really know. And that, I mean, takes a toll, definitely.
So you like officially changed, like you that was in college, or that was, how long ago was that?
Well, I guess there's so much that goes into transition, so there's not like,
yeah,
there wasn't one point where I was a man and one point where I was a woman. It's a whole lot more complicated than that.
right,
And so I say I presented as male,
yeah.
and didn't necessarily identify that way. I decided to transition when I was in my master's program.
Okay.
I was teaching high school at the time. And I decided on what steps to take. And then I finished that master's program. And over the summer and in the next year, as I was applying to my doctoral program, that's when the bulk of choosing my name, changing my name, when I started presenting as Juliet in public and things like that, happened, which was, I guess I decided to transition a little over 3 years ago.
Okay. Very cool. So I get more into like the culture of it. Law-wise, what laws in our culture have affected transgender people, and have they affected you personally?
Yeah, the state of Tennessee is, as far as I know, the only state in the union that has a law that explicitly forbids you to change the gender marking on your birth certificate. So no matter what you do, no matter how you identify, even most states use like having surgery as a metric, which I consider really problematic, but that's what they do. Tennessee doesn't even have that. So legally I'm male. I think that's funny to a certain extent because it means I can probably get married if I ever find the right woman. But it also means that I don't know what prison they'll throw me in if I ever get arrested. I don't know, and that's a really scary prospect, that if I was arrested and put into a male cell in a male prison.
Yeah.
And it's just fundamentally invalid. It's even to have documentation, like my driver's license still has a male on it, which means that every time I am pulled over by a cop, every time that I go to a hotel, every time that I go into some sort of place that requires ID to get in,
Like the liquor store, buying beer or something
anything,
like that.
I have to out myself. And God knows how people will respond.
Yeah.
And it's literally because it is illegal for me to change it. Now, one of the wonderful things that the Obama administration has done is they have made it to where you don't have to have surgery in order to change your passport. And so you can have a doctor say, this person is taking steps towards transition, and use that to get a passport with the gender that you identify as, because they identify it as a security risk, that if you go to a foreign country and you are presenting as one gender and your documentation says another, that can be really, really bad for you.
Yeah.
So fortunately, because of that, I have a government document that has female on it. And so I just take my passport whenever I go to hotels or things like that, because to try to avoid that. But in terms of state documents and things like that, they all still say male. And that's definitely
That's hard.
hard for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Share with us like what sets your culture apart, if any, from the dominant CIS culture. Examples like marriage, children, dating.
I guess it's difficult for me to think of it, transgender being a culture to a
Really?
certain extent. Because it feels, I mean, it feels like an identity.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly many of those things can be different, but so much depends upon at what point in the transition you're at and where you're at,
Right.
and things like that. Are there specific questions within that you're particularly curious about?
No, actually, that answers a lot to me, that you feel of it more as an identity.
That is the
than, like, a
answer.
culture. Yeah, it really is the answer for me.
I got a question on, like, in regards to culture, like, you being a transgender, do you see it as, like, do you see it as a step, like a big part of your individualism as far as who you are? Like, I don't want to say it's your culture because it's not like a culture, but it's like, do you look at it as, do you look at this as something that makes you actually you, or is this just something that's a part of you?
It reminds me of an essay I read by a trans woman who said that she felt like she's only trans whenever her gender identity is in question. That the rest of the time she's just female. And the only times where she's trans is when that femaleness is not accepted or it's somehow being contested in some capacity. And so that's kind of the response that I kind of have to that question, that I am trans, but the times when I have to be trans significantly are the times when I'm forced into being trans by a society that won't let me just be female for various parts of my experience or various parts of my body or different things like that. And so it certainly, it so informs my experience, and I'm part of the reason I have a lot of anxiety and depression is because I'm always aware of it, and I'm always aware of how people will respond to it, and how all these signals are sent to me by my culture about how I should feel like I'm really a man no matter what I do, or that I'm deviant, or I'm bad, or I'm fundamentally unattractive because I'm really a dude or whatever. But so much of it is just external forces that continually thrust this label upon me. And so I own it and identify that way, but I can see an ideal world where I could just be female and not have to be trans, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I guess we've been over a lot of feeling discriminated against. Is there anything else off the top of your head besides having to, present your ID and stuff, like just every day that you feel discriminated?
I mean, it's a constant fear.
Yeah.
I think I have it easier than a lot of trans women because I am closer to how people, I'm closer to the cisgender ideal.
Right.
And both in my presentation, but also my voice. Voice is a huge thing.
Yeah.
And I've been fortunate there in the way that I've been able to change my voice, because you do have to change it. It doesn't happen with hormones.
Right.
But even then, I have to be worried about what doctors will say. I mean, there are oftentimes trans folks who go to medical facilities and they tell them, we can't treat you here because you're trans. In emergency room situations where they'll say, we won't see you here because you're transgender. In applying for housing, I have to get my ID there, and I don't know how they'll respond to that. In terms of hiring, one of the reasons I'm so out and open is because I am in a field, particularly psychotherapy, probably working in university settings, where I think there's less explicit chance for discrimination. But even then, I mean, I never really know.
Yeah.
So I guess I feel like I'm particularly fortunate, especially because I'm white, because I'm middle class, because I'm able-bodied, because I'm in a field that is more tolerant, where that discrimination is more of an abstract fear than something that's happened to me. But I'm constantly aware that it could, and constantly on guard that it could, and never really knowing how much that has any impact on the people who interact with me or what decisions they make surrounding me.
Yeah, you had a question about religion, I think you had told me.
In the social aspect of things, overall, are you happy with how society treats you?
No, not at all. I'm completely illegitimate in the eyes of most of society. And I'm almost like I'm an affront to all kinds of different sensibilities, that my very existence is challenging and threatening to people. And if that's one of the reasons that so many trans women are killed every year. And most of the trans women who are killed are women of color who are sex workers, just basically all kinds of identities that society doesn't care about wrapped up into one person. And just every year hundreds are killed with very little attention paid because with social sanction, because we are so just perceived so negatively by society.
Are you a religious person?
Not particularly. I grew up in the Unitarian Universalist Church, which is, it is a religion, but it's not that religious, if that makes sense. And I still stay involved with that, but it's not a very codified religion.
That's all my questions.
Okay. I was trying to think. Do you feel like that religion has persecuted you?
I think significantly it has, because a lot of the ideas people get about sex, gender, and sexual orientation come from religion. Oftentimes transgender people get lumped in with gay people. And so a lot of the prejudice against trans women in particular comes from homophobia, because a lot of people basically consider trans women to be gay men in disguise, who are trying to lure straight men into having sex with them by presenting as female. And so because of that conflation, a lot of transgender-related oppression arises from homophobia, which is heavily informed by the Bible and Christianity. And I think a lot of the justifications that are used for just saying, well, God meant you to be a man, and you were born a man, and you shouldn't go against God's will. By doing that, the justifications largely rest in religion and faith, especially in the South.
Oh, yeah.
I think being trans, there's more pushback from secular sources too, because they say, well, your chromosomes are XY no matter what you do, so fundamentally you're still male as well. So I don't want to make this religion's problem exclusively. Mm-hmm. But yeah, a lot of the rationales that I hear for, I went to a class once and somebody asked me, so you can go and you can go and get your tallywhacker cut off. And they use the word tallywhacker, which I found endearing. But fundamentally, you'll always be a man because God intended you that way. And how do you respond to that? And it's difficult, because I often hear messages of we love you despite your sin, or we love you despite your flaws, and I'm kind of like, I don't see this as a flaw. I see this as you making this a problem, not me. And I don't really want your love if you can't accept me as I am. That if you, it's like you're basically saying you would prefer me to be a person that I'm not, on a really visceral level. And that to me just seems the opposite of love.
If you could pick one or two things that you would like society to change or do, or even on a legislative level, what would that be? What's most important?
I think probably the biggest thing is letting people be who they identify as. Not having some kind of metric where if you're here, you're male, and you're here, you're female. And some people, like, even if they feel like they're trans positive, they think, well, you're still going to be male until you have a surgery, or you're still going to be male until you change your name, or you're still going to be male until you present a certain way, or you talk a certain way, or you are a certain way, or you can never be female. Like, that is just a fundamental, the door is closed to you no matter what you do, no matter how you identify, no matter anything like that. And I think that this, because it fundamentally it's just like a slippery slope that we have to define what male and female are, and that's always going to be a ciscentric definition, unless you create a space where people can be who they identify as. That it doesn't take, you don't have to pass a litmus test, you don't have to meet a certain metric of acceptability in order to be male or be female, that identity is valid, if that's how you identify.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest thing for me.
Do you think that there's more acceptance in the North as opposed to the South?
I've lived in Knoxville all my life,
So you don't know.
so I don't really know. I will say that I am really, really eager to leave Knoxville.
Yeah, I can understand that.
I think there's part of me that knows that there's a lot of work that needs to be done here, but I feel like the state, I feel like the university, and by default I feel like the people have made it clear they don't want me here, that I am not wanted, I'm not respected, I'm not valued. And at this point in my life, I'm just ready to say, okay, you win. Let me get through this program, and I will get out. I think, especially for trans people, it's going to be hard anywhere in the country. But I think it'll be better than a place that that makes it illegal for me to be female.
Well, I thank you for answering our questions, and
Thank you so much.
I think this is so important. You're right, it's so important to get the message out and to continue the dialogue, because if you don't know, you make judgments, So I appreciate you doing this and taking time out of your day and all of that. So
Thank you so much.
Thank
This
you.
has actually been really interesting for me.